Hello ladies and gents, it is Phoenix the Insane Gentleman Gamer, and I wanted to show you a quick snippet of my Sandbox mode in KSP. I have a spaceship construction dock that needs some refueling, so I decided to bring you along on this quick refueling mission, just to show you a couple of the things that I have, and showcase a couple of the mods that I have installed. So select the refueler, and off we go. Now the first thing you'll notice is that I have a ton of MacLeod stuff up on the interface, and that is because I am a scrub and I have not yet learned how to be completely efficient at docking and or rendezvous, so I'm learning slowly. I'm weaning myself off of MacLeod. Right now I just use it basically to plot intercept points and stuff, but I do all of the fine-tuning and engine control myself. So the second thing you'll notice is that this rocket is big. I mean, it is huge. Any seasoned players of Kerbal Space Program will notice that the orange tank in the middle is in fact the biggest Rockamax tank that you can have, but ever since they introduced the NASA parts, aka the giant engines at the bottom there, it is relatively easy to get those things up in orbit. So, right now I'm just basically doing the ascent phase, trying to keep my speed under about 300 meters a second to reduce the effects of aerodynamic drag, and as you can see I'm barely managing that due to the ripple effect coming off the top of the cone. I say cone, there is no cone, it's just a docking port. So anyway, I'm going to speed up the ascent a bit, just to where we can get things moving along so you can actually see the space station in all its glory. It's at this point that I should probably note I make a slightly retarded gravity turn, even though this is what I normally try to do, but it's because I'm trying not to turn with the solid boosters on, because if I turn with the solid boosters on, the entire thing spins out of control and explodes in fiery glory. So we're trying to prevent that. So here I make sure I'm ascending to the correct apoapsis, and then afterwards I just decide to coast there and set the maneuver node, and there we go. If you'll notice here, the SAS is trying to use up every ounce of monopropellant that I have in the tanks, so I eventually decide to just fine-tune it myself and get the thing to where it's at least pointed in the right direction, and then just let the SAS make the final tiny course corrections. And then just decide to coast to the apoapsis where I'm going to make the burn. Now notice the delta V at the side. That's going to become critical in just a few moments. You'll see what I mean. Remember how I said that would be important? Well, it turns out I picked the wrong moment to start my burn, and so I'm not going to have any sort of circular orbit around Kerbin whatsoever. So I'm going to have to make a pretty major course correction, which is going to cost me quite a bit of fuel, but thankfully not enough so I had to abort the entire thing. It's at this point that I decide to set up the maneuver node, so I can swing the ship around, fighting the SAS every step of the way, and then I can use this nifty little feature that I forgot Kerbal Space Program has, that lets you just click on any point in your orbit and warp to the next maneuver node. I'm going to be using that quite a bit in the upcoming minutes. So I managed to swing it around to when I need to burn, and actually get the burn correct this time, so I have a nice circular orbit around Kerbin. Haha! Now as you can see, I'm basically just using MacLeod to figure out what maneuver nodes I need to set up. Well, actually, I'm letting it, to be honest, I'm letting it set up the maneuver nodes for me, but I'm doing all the burns and things myself. And I'm also learning that this is how you actually do a correct rendezvous. So, there, if you can see right there, I set the docking port as the point that I'm controlling the vessel from, so I can actually dock later using MacJeb, because if there's one thing that I completely stink at in Kerbal Space Program, it's trying to dock. I know how to do it in theory, but one, this is a massive, well, I say massive in the sense that it has a lot of mass spaceship, and it is also just, I stink at docking. I'm not going to attempt to dock with this thing. I'm just going to let MacJeb do it for me. Before you ask, yes, I do have a skipper engine attached to the back of this spacecraft to make it actually have a decent sort of thrust-to-weight ratio. So I guess this would be a good point to talk about the mods I have installed. Basically, as you can see, I have MacJeb installed, but I also have many of Bob Palmer's UKS and MKS modules, which allow you to create space stations in orbit. I also have extraplanetary launch pads installed, so I can actually create a spaceship dock. Now, you'll see what I mean as I say spaceship dock or spaceship construction yard in a moment, because Andre is coming up, and I named it Andre like Andre the Giant, because this space station is massive. And yes, I do apologize for the frame rate drop when I get near it. I'm running this on, granted it's a very good laptop, it's still a laptop, so I don't have the killer rigs that some of the other YouTube gamers have. So I do experience a bit of frame rate drop, but it's not enough to severely impact your view of this thing. Slowing it down, the big reveal. We're actually running at normal time right now. Now, I've basically been running the past, I don't know, few minutes at about double speed, but now the space station actually renders, and you'll notice there's a bit of a freeze there as the disk tries to comprehend what the heck it's loading, and we have Andre, the space station. Now, currently there are 10 Kerbals living at the space station, thanks to the OKS modules that Bob Palmer has graciously modded for KSP. There is enough supplies and reactor power to last about, at last count, it was around 400 days. And it's self-sustaining, so it can actually last much longer than that. So I'm just going to take it in here and maneuver so that we are actually close to the space station. And if you thought that the spaceship that I've been piloting this whole time was massive, well then, it's tiny compared to this thing. I mean, honestly, it took me quite a few launches and quite a few tries to put this thing together, and I'm glad that it actually came together the way it did, but it required some massive lifting power. This thing is huge. So now that we're reasonably close to it, you can see, one, it's covered in lights, two, there are a couple of giant bins of rocket parts on the side. Now, what this mod does, basically, if you have extraplanetary launch pads and the Bob Palmer UKS mods installed, is you can actually ship rocket parts from Kerbin to an outer space station or to another planet, and you can actually build spaceships that you have designed in the VAB. You can build them on said planets or said space stations. Now, you require Kerbals to do this, which is why I have 10 Kerbals in the space station, about 6 to run the space station's other needs, and 4 to actually be in the extraplanetary launch pad to build said spaceships. So, you might see me later on. I'm going to try and establish a moon base in Sandbox, mind you. Which reminds me, I'm actually going to, inspired by a few other YouTubers, I might install a completely brand new version of Kerbal Space Program and mod it out so it's basically hardcore mode, and then do a hardcore career run. Because I've seen a couple other YouTubers attempt it, and it honestly looks fun, and it looks like something you guys would have fun listening to me rage about. So, to be honest, honestly, it would probably be a challenge for me, but I am not fearful. I will attempt it. So here I'm just trying to line up basically to get a little closer to the space station, because you have to be within about 200 meters in order to lock on to a docking port, which is essential for the other part of MacJeb, as you can see. So another mod I have installed, which I actually don't have in use right now, but I might create another space station and or spaceship including it, is BD Armory, which is basically allowing you to install all sorts of myriad guns and missiles onto aircraft or spacecraft that you want to, which I will probably have something to do with that later on, but at the moment I actually do not have anything involving BD Armory running, so I might show that later. Like I said, I'll probably have either interesting mods or just some random derping about that I have for the Sandbox version of KSP, or maybe just where I can play KSP without having an incident where I mess up and lose my sanity. So, in a minute here, I'm going to be able to lock on to the docking port, so I can actually dock to the space station and refuel the space station, because believe it or not, you actually have to bring your own fuel up into space with you as well when you're trying to build your own spaceships. So, in this case, I've done this and I have the refueler positioned. Now all I need to do is dock it, which is a long, tedious process, even automated. Finally, it's at this point where I realize I can actually lock on to said docking port. So I swing the camera around, and this will be kind of your first shot at the underside of the space station, which, like I said, it's massive. It is massive. So I managed to lock on, so I now have everything needed for the docking autopilot. So I set up the docking autopilot, and since this thing is so massive, I set it for a fairly low speed limit because I don't want it to basically go as fast as it can toward the docking port, overcorrect, and then go swinging by and using up all the monopropellant trying to correct it. So, you know, when in doubt, go slow, and this applies to basically everything in life, like driving, flying, I don't know. But basically, I set it up so it's nice and tedious. So at this point, I decide to make myself some delicious hot chocolate, and then come back and watch the thing, and do a number of myriad other activities, such as, you know, the dishes. This actually took about 22 minutes in real life. It's actually much faster because I have it at 64 times the speed that it was on. So now you get to see the docking, which, yes, thankfully, it went by without a hitch, and you can now see the awesomeness that is Andre the Space Station. So very quickly, like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar, I realized that I have the extraplanetary launch pad stuff still open, so I decided to close that. And you guys can get a nice good view of the massive space station that now lies before you. Notice there are a couple of things, such as the agricultural module, which is one that has the plants in it, and the habitation ring that are part of Ball Palmer's UKS mods. So now, as you can see, I'm transferring fuel into the massive fuel tank, which that was fun to get up into orbit, let me tell you. Basically refueling so there will be enough fuel for whatever moon base I decide to launch from the space station. Doesn't take long at all, and before you know it, all the fuel is transferred, and we can safely undock, and since this is basically an unmanned spacecraft, we can just let it fall back to Kerbin with no penalty whatsoever. Also, because it's Sandbox mode, I don't have to pay for it. So now that I've undocked, I can switch over to the refueler, and I can set up so that we are pointed retrograde to Kerbin. I use the thrusters to ease back so I don't slam into the station as I'm trying to rocket past it in order to slow down enough so that I can fall back to Kerbin's surface. And basically deselect the space station as the target and line up retrograde so that I can just burn straight back to Kerbin. So with that, I will speed it back up again so you can watch as we rocket past the station, making sure we don't hit it, of course, and say farewell to Andre for now, which guaranteed I'm going to have to send more supplies up here if I'm going to keep things going, and I'm also going to have to send the crew home at some point for some much needed R&R. So as we fly by, say goodbye to the space station, everyone, and that's our journey. So with both parts of the refueler headed back to Kerbin to burn up in the atmosphere, I pop back over to Andre for another couple of quick glamour shots, and just to let you guys know, there is a shuttle, so the crew will be able to get back home. I actually take care of my Kerbals. So that was it. This is my Sandbox version of KSP, and I will see you guys next time. Until then, be true to yourselves. This is Phoenix, the Insane Gentleman Gamer. Take care, guys.